Okay, welcome back everybody. Today on the gun bench we are installing the Cajun Gunworks 75700 Omega kit in my P01 Omega. First what we'll do is set the gun off to the side, we'll open up the bag and we'll show you what you get. This kit is about 220 bucks, I believe, if I paid shipped. You got the big bag with multiple little bags inside. So first bag we got here is the three-piece spring kit. So you have your hammer spring, this is a firing pin block spring, the little one, and then you have a firing pin spring. Next you have the Omega hammer, this P-series hammer. It's a nice looking hammer, I like that. You have the actual hammer pin, so that's what will hold the strut on. This is the double action roller. It's the trigger bar rides on. You have your Sear springs. A white is a 0.25 and then a 0.23 for the black spring. That's going to be up to you what you want to put in. You have a reduced weight trigger return spring. We'll be putting that in. And then the last bag is the actual short reset kit. So they sell all these parts separately. That's why it's all separated bags. This kit has an extended firing pin, a disconnector, and then the lifter for the firing pin block. And it also has another firing pin spring. So the one that's in the three-piece bag, you can put that up, keep it for later. You know, you didn't pay for, you know, it's probably a $2 spring. So you have that. Never hurts to have an extra. Change it out here, you know, after so many thousand rounds. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the gun. We do have a clear and empty firearm. And what I'm going to do is start by doing a field strip. We're going to line up the two lines in the middle, or in the back, right here. I'm sure everybody knows how to do this part. We're going to push this slide stop out, pull it out, and then we're going to remove the slide. Maybe. There we go. Remove the barrel and recoil spring. Set those off to the side. You won't need those. We're also going to set the frame off to the side for right now. So now we can work on the slide and change out what we need to change in there. So I'm going to grab the short reset kit. And what we're going to want to do is remove this front pin here. So your pin might look different. It's probably, if you haven't changed the gun out, it's going to be a standard roll pin like this, which have been notoriously known for breaking. Mine has the upgraded spring from Cajun in it already, so, but it's no different. What you're going to want to do is drive this pin out. So go ahead and drive that pin out of the gun. Once you do, the pin comes out. You're going to keep your hand over the firing pins and remove your punch. From there, your firing pin is going to come out, and then the firing pin block will dump out, and then the spring. So let's set the old firing pin, the spring, off to the side. Firing pin block, we'll take the spring out of it and set that spring off to the side. And then we'll open up the kit, get the new firing pin and spring. And then we'll go to our three-piece set, this kit here, and we will remove the medium spring that's in there. No, we won't. We'll remove the smaller spring that's in there, sorry. Set that off to the side. So now we can go ahead and put it back in the gun. So I'm going to take the firing pin with its spring and then the firing pin block, and I'm going to put the firing pin block back in the gun like this with the mouth facing inwards towards the firing pin. I'm going to put that down in there, and I'm going to push up on the firing pin block pretty far, and then I'm going to take the firing pin and I'm going to put it in with cuts up. So what I do is I put it down in there. I'm going to push it down in there as far as I can get it. And then what you'll want to do is grab a, let's see, where's it at? Well, we can use We can use this punch for right now and stick it through. So push in just till it's right at the back of the slide. Stick a punch through there to capture it, because the firing pin block won't catch it. And then you can start to drive your pin back through. With this pin, you'll want to have the cutouts facing up. You're going to put this into the frame. Get it in there as far as you can, and then you want to give it a few hits with your hammer here. You'll get it through there enough to knock the punch out, and now you can go ahead and drive it the rest of the way through. Hit it until it's pretty even on both sides. I'm going to do one more tap here. And now the slide is complete. So if you want, go ahead and put your barrel and recoil spring back in. And then set it off to the side. Grab your frame and remove your grips. These are cool hand grips. Some cheapies from eBay or Amazon. I mean, they're about 40-50 bucks, but they're nice grips. They definitely feel good. So not to take away from cool hands, they make some pretty good feeling grips, and they seem pretty solid. All right. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to remove your decocking lever. So if you look down in the lever itself, this right side or the left side lever is pin. It has a pin that goes all the way through. So this lever and this pin that you see coming all the way through is all one piece. So what you can do is push down on the ejector here. Push down on it and then start to pull out from the right side. And once you get it to a certain point, you can keep pulling it. Eventually the spring here will let loose, or you can just take a little flathead and push it underneath and lift that spring out from underneath the lip, and I'll show you where it sits here in a minute. Once you get that out, you can pull this left side out, push down on the trigger bar just a little bit, and then rotate this lever up until you can pull it out. From here, just rotate until you can get out the right side. You can dump that spring out of there, pull it out just so you don't lose it. You can see it goes back in the gun like this, and it's got a small little roll pin that's sticking down into the frame. Hopefully you can see it right here, and that's where the spring goes down into, and I'll show you when we get to that point. Alright, so from here you want to remove the sear housing, the lifter, and the roller. And the way I do that is by removing the ejector first. So if you have if you look down in here, you'll see the slot, how the ejector works. It comes in and it comes underneath this pin that comes all the way through the frame. And this pin can only come out from the right to the left. As you can see, it's bigger here than it is down here, so it can't pass this ejector. So what I do is you can push with a small flathead and kind of push down in there and just push the ejector underneath. So what I'll do is I'm going to push down, push the spring down, and I'm just going to kind of lift it up out of there. It's really simple. I'll show you how it goes back in. I push down on the ejector spring, I'll lift it up in there, push down, and kind of rotate it out, just like that. And once you do that, now you free up the sear cage, and you can push it out with a punch. Recommend having the hammer up when you do it. Push out this pin. Keep your finger over if you want, but nothing will really go flying. And you can see how that pin works. See how the ejector wraps up underneath it. It sits like this. So you can't drive that pin out without taking the ejector out. So now that I've done that, everything's still captured. I'm going to put my hand here and just pull that punch out, and I'm going to dump the contents out. You'll have 3 things fall out. You'll have the actual sear itself, the firing pin block lifter, and then the double action roller. So we'll set these pieces that we're replacing over here. Let's see what else. No, that's it. And now it's time to remove the hammer. So the first thing you want to do is remove the sheet metal that they have in here. That protects and prevents the mag from dipping in. What you'll do is just grab a small punch, push this top pin out right here. Just push that out. Now that might just flop out of there. Keep your pins separated. And now you can remove the main string, or the hammer strut and the spring. So to do that, just push out this bottom pin. I keep my thumb over here and I push down on it pretty good. Push that pin out. Take out my punch, and then I can remove the piece that captures the spring the pin drives through, and the spring itself. We're replacing this spring with a 13-pound hammer spring. So the next thing to remove is the actual hammer itself. So if you want to, what you got to do is lift up the disconnector like this. You can see the disconnector normally sits in the gun like this, pulls the back when you pull the hammer. So what you want to have to do is lift it up so it's up like this with the hammer. Once you do that, you can push this hammer pin out. I'll show you why you have to do that as soon as I pull this out. Put that off to the side, and then the last thing to do would be grab the hammer or sear spring. Just pull it out. You're replacing that. And now we'll get to the trigger. But real quick, let me show you what I meant about the disconnector. The disconnector sits on the hammer like this. So when it's in the gun, and this pin's through it, and it's in this downward position, rests in there, so you can't drive the pin out. So it has to be up. Now we're replacing that disconnector. We're also going to remove the hammer strut and the hammer. So let's just take the strut off by pushing this back pin out. Remove the strut from the hammer. Put your hammer up. You got a new one now. And now we will remove the trigger. So what you'll do is want to drive out this pin here on the right side, on the left side, and drive that pin out. When you do, make sure the punch goes through with it, and then wait until you pull the punch out until you get a hold of that spring. So there's the pin. The punch is still capturing the return spring in there. So I'm going to keep my hand in here, and I'm going to pull out the punch. And now I can lift up the trigger bar, take that return spring out, get it off over there. And now if you were actually replacing the trigger, this is where you do it. If you want to put the 85 in, it just slips on just like that. So super simple. So now the gun is stripped. If you want to see it completely stripped, I have a full video on that. But for what you need to do, this is stripped. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to put it back in trigger first. So you're going to need a small slave pin in order to get that lifter spring back in there. So I have 2 slaves here that I use on the P01. And the first one is small, and I'll show you why. So let me grab the reduced power trigger return spring here. Take it out of the bag. Now I'm going to be putting it back in the gun and the trigger like this. Take that bar off. So this shorter leg that's coming down is going to go in this hole right here in that trigger. So if you can see, it's got a little hole right there. And I'm going to put that down in there. I'm going to get it lined up, so I'm going to push the spring in and down until I can slide my little slave pin through the hole and it goes through both sides. I might have to keep pushing down just to... Oh, look at that, popped it all the way through. Never done that. There we go. So you just want to push it through to where enough it's just inside on both sides of the trigger. That way it can actually go down into the frame and it doesn't hit. And when you put your pin back through, you drive the pin out. You know how to use a slave pin. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to put the trigger back in first. So what I'll do is I'm going to put the bar back on, and I'll show you something in the frame real quick. You have another spring right here, and it might be wobbling around right now. If it fell out, put it back in the hole right down here in the frame. So what I'll do is I'm going to put this spring kind of over there on the right side, and it's got a groove in the bottom of the trigger bar right here, and that's where that spring sits. So the end of the spring right here sits in that groove. So I'm going to put this down in, put the trigger bar down, and get the that spring underneath it. So it should be right there. So now that when I push down on the bar, it's got tension, so I know it's captured by that spring. Now once I do that, I can go ahead and get the trigger lined up to where I can see the end of that slave pin. That's why I usually paint the end of my slaves white, but I've used this one so much it's worn off. And one thing you'll want to remember is that that leg of the trigger has to sit in that groove in the frame. So push that down in there. If you slip the back here, don't worry, you can put that spring back under there. So it's more important just to get this lined up first. So now once I get it where I need it to be, I'm going to take my trigger pin. I'm going to try to be able to see this while I do it. I'm going to push down and get it all lined up, hopefully. No, slip. Just about getting it lined up is the difficult part. Now yeah, there we go. Now I got it through enough to where it's captured the spring in there and the slave pin has came out. So I'm going to look over here and just see where I'm at. I should be able to take the pin the rest of the way through. There we go. So now the pin's all the way through and the trigger is where it needs to be. It's still good back here where it needs to be. It's still on the spring. So now let's go ahead and grab the hammer and put it back in. So let's grab, what we got here? Where's the parts? There's what we need. We've got the hammer pin and the new hammer itself. By the way, I ordered this Wednesday night at like 11 o'clock, and it showed up Saturday, so props to Cajun Gunworks for getting the parts out quickly. Can't beat that. Ordered from SIG the same time, and it's, yeah, still not even in this state. So now I'm going to put the strut back in like this. So take the face that hits the firing pin, the strut's going to go back in like this, and then just take that pin and stick it through. Really? There we go. So that's how it should look. And now you're going to grab the new disconnector. I'm going to dump these out back here. This is your disconnector. So you're going to go on this side of the frame, and it's got a stud on the hammer. And you're going to put it on like that, and I lift it straight up. And then I'm going to drop it back down into the frame. And I'm going to line it up right through this back rear pinhole. Once I get it lined up, and I'm going to take my pin with the cutout in the head on the right, facing the right, so you'll see how it lines up. Get my hammer lined back up. There we go. So now that's lined up, I can push the disconnector back down in front of the trigger. Just make sure that it spring back in before we put the sear and roller and everything. So I'm going to go with the white spring. Put that one there for now. So I'm going to take the spring, grab it here, put it down into the frame, just kind of push it down. And now I'm going to put the sear and everything back together. So you'll want to have a slave pin, and you'll want to take the sear just like this. Get all your parts ready. So have it like this. You've got the undercut here. You've got the nub on the right side. Go ahead and put your slave pin, get it started. And then you're going to take your lifter. It's going to set just like this. And then you take your roller and put it in. It's kind of got a cut out there. And then slide your slave pin through. So ideally it's going to sit like this. So you can see everything, how it's sitting. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the gun around, and I'm going to put it back in. And I'm going to grab it this way. It's going to go back in this way with the frame sitting the way it is. Make sure your slave doesn't fall out or get too far over where it doesn't hold the roller. So now I'm going to put it in. And the back of the sear has got a groove. This is how I want my hammer too. And I'm just going to sit it down in there. And once I get it to a certain point, I'll be able to take off the tweezers and start working my pin through. You have to push down just a little bit. There we go. So now I've got the pin through. This is how everything should look when it's back in the gun. Put your slave pin off to the side. And now we can put the decocker back in. Okay, so I don't want you go over there. Put this over here. So now what we're going to want to do is start by putting the ejector back in. So the ejector is going to go back in the frame like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push down on the ejector spring with this end, and I'm going to roll it up underneath that pin we just put through, and kind of push down and up and just make sure it gets seated in place where it needs to be. This lever is going to keep it down where it needs to be once you get it through. So now we can put this spring back in. It's going to go back in just like this with this lip facing forward. And you're just going to stick it down in that very small little roll pin hole right down in the frame. You might have to use tweezers. Might be able to get it with your fingers. Usually I can't, so I'm just going to put it down in there. Flip that end around so it's facing forward. Now it's going to fall all the way down, but you'll be picking it up with the decocking lever. So the spring, see how the spring is sitting forward, it's coming forward. Well, when I put this back in the gun, this lip here, that spring is going to go underneath it. So imagine I'm going to push this through, and then I'm going to push that spring down, and I'm going to lock it behind this lever here, or this piece of metal here. And that's what tensions this so it can't come out. Oop. So when I do this, I'm going to push down on the ejector. Now, there's a couple different ways. You might find your own better way, but I'm just going to put it in. It's easier if I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to make sure I go through that loop on that spring. And capture it like that. So now once I get it like that, I'm going to go ahead and take the right side lever and put it in. So I'm going to push down on the trigger bar, and I'm going to put the lever in. I'll have to kind of lift it up and down, just like that. And I can back it out just a little bit. There we go. And now you're going to push it through and just get it started into that the other side. Oop. That's why I usually start with it the opposite way. There. Now I've got it somewhat started, that way it's not going to go flying. And I should be able to start pushing it all the way through. I have to push down on your... Oh, see, I went too far there. Got it all the way. Now, sometimes you can do that, but what I like to do is while I'm pushing that through, I push down on that spring because it's easier to get it caught underneath that lip. See, right here, I would have to try to push that spring all the way back and underneath. So I'm going to pull that lever out again, just a little bit. Enough to where I can grab my favorite slotted screwdriver, grab that spring, make sure you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to grab that spring with my slot, push it down as far as I can go, down and back. Whoop, missed. And then slide the lever through. And now you'll see, I'm sorry, I'm working with a brand new camera that, so now you can see how the spring is underneath that lip on the decocking lever, or the bar itself. So now that you've got that all, you're done basically. You're gonna put the new, where's she at? Your new hammer spring in, your blue spring. So you'll just want to slide that up through the hole, capture it on the strut, just like that. And then you're going to want to take what captures, put it up on here with the cutout facing forward. And then you can, what I do is get the pin close by, get it lined up, start pushing it up in there, and then just kind of get it down on the table. Push it down, just make sure it's not getting bound up. Push it down. Once I get it down far enough, I can start kind of playing with it until I get the pin to slide through, just like that. So now that's captured. Yep, technically everything should work right now. So now we've got everything back in the gun. The kit is complete. Let's see, make sure we don't have any extra parts. You will have this extra spring, like I said. And then you'll have the extra Sear spring too. So let's give it a shot, see how she feels. And I'm going to do a separate video on before and after on how they, what the difference is, how they feel. Like I said in that video, I don't suspect the single action trigger is going to have that big of a difference. I would assume the reset's going to be better. I really think the double action's where it's gonna shine. I'm gonna lose some weight, but I think smoothing it up is going to be the biggest part of it. So now we've got the grips back on. Let's go ahead and grab the slide. Slide it on. Maybe. Get your lines lined up in the back and then grab your lever. Get it through. So let's test out that double action pull. A lot smoother than it was before. Single action still got all that pre-travel. I didn't think that would be taken out. But the brake still got a little creep right there. But man, that brake's a lot nicer than it was. It was really spongy. That's nice. So now let's go ahead and test reset, see where we're at here. Resets a little bit. Yeah, it's a lot better. That's still goes pretty far out, but it's a lot smoother. It feels a hell of a lot better than it did. Yeah, that's nice. All right, so that is the instructions to install your Cajun Gunworks 75-700 kit from obviously Cajun Gunworks in your CZ75 P01 Omega. I hope everybody enjoyed this video. If you have this kit, let me know. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Obviously, Cajun is the guys to talk to, and they're great with customer service. You can call them. They should be able to help. And I hope everybody sees the other videos, so we'll do before and after, which if you're installing this kit, you know how it feels. And I think it's worth the money. Definitely worth 220 bucks. This is an awesome firearm, and now the trigger is just even better. And you know, there's not much more I can say about it. So thank everybody for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more videos, and let me know what trigger kits you want to see installed. You've seen the guns that I have. If you want to see me install a new trigger, you want to see me do some other stuff, let me know. I need some more ideas of what we can do on this channel. So we'll see you next time on the Gun Bench.